You wake up, same routine, same thoughts, same fears, and somewhere deep inside, you know something's wrong. Not with your life necessarily, but with the way you're living it, like you're playing a character written by someone else. Following rules you never agreed to, avoiding truths you've never examined. You tell yourself it's just how things are, that everyone feels this way, that freedom is for other people, people braver, people different, people who somehow escape the invisible cage you've been living in since you can't remember when. But here's what Carl Jung discovered that changes everything. The prison isn't out there. It's not your job, your relationships, or your circumstances. The prison is your mind. And worse, you're the one who built it, brick by brick, thought by thought, fear by fear. You didn't mean to. You were trying to protect yourself, to fit in, to survive. But somewhere along the way, safety became a cell. And now you're locked inside a life that feels like it belongs to someone else. Jung called this the ego's trap. The way we construct an identity to please the world, then forget it's just a mask. We become so attached to who we think we should be that we bury who we actually are. And that buried self, that shadow, becomes the warden of your prison. Today, I'm going to show you how your mind creates your prison, how your thoughts become bars, how your fears become walls, and most importantly, how Jung discovered the only key that can set you free. Because the door was never locked from the outside. You just convinced yourself it was. You didn't choose to become a prisoner. You chose to be safe. There's a difference. And that difference is where your freedom went. When you were young, you learned quickly. Certain behaviors got approval, others got rejection. Certain feelings were acceptable, others had to be hidden. So you adapted. You became what was required. And every time you suppressed a truth, avoided a conflict, or swallowed your real reaction, you added another bar to the cage. Jung understood this better than almost anyone. He saw that we don't just have conscious desires. We have an entire unconscious world beneath our awareness, filled with everything we've rejected about ourselves, everything that didn't fit the image we needed to project. He called this the shadow. Not evil, not darkness in the moral sense, just the parts of you that got exiled, the anger you couldn't express, the desires you couldn't admit, the truth you couldn't speak, all of it pushed down, locked away, forgotten. But here's the trap. What you reject doesn't disappear. It just operates from the shadows. It controls you precisely because you refuse to see it. Every time you people please without wanting to, that's your shadow. Every time you sabotage something good, that's your shadow. Every time you feel stuck in a pattern you hate but can't escape, that's your shadow running the show from behind the scenes. Erich Fromm wrote about this too. He said, "We have a fear of freedom." That's not a metaphor. It's a psychological fact. Freedom means responsibility. It means facing who you really are. It means giving up the comfort of being told what to do, what to think, what to feel. So instead, we choose our prison. We accept the limits. We follow the script. Because at least inside the cage, someone else is in charge. At least inside the cage, we don't have to face the terrifying question, who would I be if I were truly free? Your mind creates your prison by convincing you that the bars are protection, that the limits are wisdom, that staying small is staying safe. And the most brutal part, you start to defend your own captivity. You argue for your limitations. You explain why change is impossible, why freedom is unrealistic, why this is just how life is. But it's not. It's just how your prison is. And you built it so well that you forgot it's not the world. It's just your version of it. The architecture of your mental prison is made of beliefs you never questioned, rules you never chose, fears you inherited from people who were afraid before you, and the foundational lie that keeps it all standing, that you're safer inside than out, that conformity is strength, that hiding your truth is maturity. But Jung knew better. He knew that every moment you stay in that prison, a part of you dies. The real you, the whole you, the you that was born to be free. Your conscious mind, the part of you reading this right now, is just the surface. a tiny island in an ocean of unconscious patterns, reactions, and drives that run your life without asking permission. Jung discovered something that most people never want to hear. You don't know yourself. Not really. The you that you present to the world, the you that you think you are, is just a persona, a mask, a carefully constructed image designed to navigate social reality without getting hurt. But beneath that mask is everything you've denied, and it's running the show. This is where the prison gets sophisticated, because it's not just about what you consciously believe, it's about what's happening in the basement of your psyche while you're upstairs pretending everything's fine. Your shadow contains every impulse you learned to suppress, every truth you learned to hide, every part of yourself that wasn't acceptable to your family, your culture, your environment. And here's the trap. The harder you push it down, the more powerfully it controls you from below. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, understood this paradox deeply. He wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is your freedom. But most people never find that space, because their unconscious reactions happen too fast. Their shadow strikes before their awareness can catch up. You snap at someone you love, you sabotage an opportunity, you run from intimacy, you repeat the same destructive pattern for the 100th time. And afterward, you wonder why. You tell yourself you'll do better next time, but next time the same thing happens, because you're not fighting the behavior, you're fighting your shadow. And the shadow always wins when you refuse to look at it. The whisper of the shadow is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It just makes you uncomfortable around certain people, makes you react disproportionately to small triggers, makes you avoid situations where you might have to face parts of yourself you've decided don't exist. Jung said it plainly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Read that again. Everything you think is just bad luck, just how things turned out, just your personality, is actually your shadow-controlling outcomes from behind the curtain. The prison becomes complete when you start identifying with your persona so completely that you forget it's not you. You become the role, the good child, the strong one, the logical one, the caretaker, the rebel. Whatever mask you put on to survive becomes your identity. And anything that doesn't fit that identity gets locked in the shadow. But here's what happens in that darkness. The parts of you that were exiled don't just sit quietly. They ferment, they intensify, they wait. And when they finally break through, which they always do, it's not gentle. It's explosive. The breakdown, the affair, the rage, the collapse. All of it shadow material that you refuse to integrate consciously. So it integrated itself violently. Your unconscious doesn't need your permission. It will be heard. The only question is whether you listen voluntarily, or whether it has to destroy your carefully constructed persona to get your attention. Most people choose destruction, because looking at the shadow requires courage most of us don't think we have. It requires admitting that the person you've been pretending to be isn't the whole truth. That beneath the mask is something raw, wild, unacceptable, and paradoxically, more real than anything you've shown the world. Here's the part no one wants to admit. You prefer your prison, not consciously, but in every choice you make, every pattern you repeat, every time you had the chance to break free and didn't. Because freedom is terrifying. The cage is familiar, and humans will choose familiar pain over unknown possibility almost every time. Jung called this the problem of opposites. We crave freedom and fear it simultaneously. We want authenticity and run from it in the same breath. We're drawn to transformation while clutching desperately to who we've always been. And this internal split keeps us paralyzed, trapped between two desires that seem impossible to reconcile. The comfort of chains is real. Inside your mental prison, you know the rules. You know your role. You know what's expected. There's no ambiguity, no overwhelming responsibility, no terrifying openness of possibility. Jean-Paul Sartre understood this deeply. He wrote about bad faith, the way we lie to ourselves to escape the burden of freedom. We pretend we have no choice. We say, "I have to," when we mean, "I choose to." We blame circumstances, other people, our past, anything to avoid the crushing weight of admitting, "I could change this. I just don't want to face what that would require." The prison offers something precious, an excuse. As long as you're trapped, you don't have to try. As long as you're limited, you don't have to risk. As long as you're stuck, you don't have to face the possibility that you might fail even when freed. And so you defend your cage. You explain why you can't leave your job, why you can't end that relationship, why you can't pursue that dream. And all of it is just fear dressed up as wisdom, cowardice disguised as practicality. But the chains aren't just psychological comfort. They're also protection from judgment, from rejection, from the social consequences of being truly yourself. Because here's what happens when you step out of your prison. Not everyone celebrates. Most people feel threatened because your freedom reminds them of their captivity. Rollo May wrote about this brilliantly. He said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, that when we face genuine choice, genuine possibility, we experience vertigo, because with freedom comes responsibility. And with responsibility comes the inability to blame anyone else for our lives. Your mind keeps you imprisoned by making freedom look like chaos. It shows you all the risks, all the uncertainties, all the ways it could go wrong. And it conveniently forgets to mention that staying in the cage also has a cost that's paid slowly, invisibly, in the gradual death of your spirit. You look around at other people who seem free, and you tell yourself they're different, they're braver, they have advantages you don't have, they don't understand your situation. All of it is just your prison talking, creating distance between you and possibility, making freedom seem like something for others, but not for you. The most insidious comfort of chains is this: they allow you to stay unconscious. As long as you're trapped, you don't have to do the work of individuation. You don't have to face your shadow. You don't have to integrate the parts of yourself you've been running from. You can just keep playing the same small, safe, suffocating role forever. Until you can't. Until something breaks. Until the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of leaving. And that's when everything changes. If this is hitting differently than anything you've heard before, don't scroll past the subscribe button. You're here because something in you is ready to break free. The next video is already unlocking another door. Stay with me. You can't become who you're meant to be without killing who you've been. That's not metaphor. That's the price of freedom. And it's why most people never pay it. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming a whole, integrated self. But he never sugarcoated what it requires. It requires dying, not physically, but psychologically. Ego death, the dissolution of the identity you've clutched so tightly, the ending of the story you've been telling about yourself. And that feels like annihilation, because in many ways, it is. When you start to break free from your mental prison, you don't just change a few habits. You dismantle the entire structure of who you thought you were. The persona cracks, the mask falls, and what's underneath is raw, unfamiliar, terrifying. This is where most people turn back, right at the edge of transformation, because it doesn't feel like growth. It feels like collapse, like everything you've built is crumbling, like you're losing yourself instead of finding yourself. Søren Kierkegaard wrote about this. He said that despair is the sickness unto death, not physical death, but the death of possibility. When you refuse to become who you truly are, when you cling to a false self out of fear, you experience a living death. You exist, but you don't live. You breathe, but you're not alive. The death before freedom is this: every certainty you held must be questioned. Every belief you inherited must be examined. Every part of your identity that was given to you rather than chosen by you must be released. And that process is excruciating, because your ego doesn't know the difference between transformation and destruction. To your ego, letting go of who you've been is the same as ceasing to exist. So it fights, it clings, it creates every possible excuse to stop the process. It floods you with anxiety, doubt, fear. It whispers, "This is too much, you're not ready, maybe never." But Jung knew something crucial. You can't integrate the shadow without ego death. You can't become whole without letting the fractured self shatter. The persona must die for the true self to emerge. And there's no way around this, only through. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this suffering. He wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. But he missed the third option, the voluntary suffering of transformation. The conscious choice to endure the pain of growth rather than the numbness of stagnation. When you start to leave your mental prison, you lose things, friends who only knew your mask, relationships that depended on your inauthenticity, jobs that required you to betray yourself, comforts that kept you small. And in those losses, it feels like you're losing everything, but you're not. You're losing what was never yours. You're releasing what was never real. The false self must die so the real self can breathe. This is the darkest part of the journey, the liminal space between who you were and who you're becoming, where nothing is certain, where the old identity is gone, but the new one hasn't fully formed, where you feel like you're floating in a void with no ground beneath you. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, and he said it's not optional. It's not a detour, it's the path. Everyone who truly individuates must pass through this darkness, must feel the terror of their own dissolution, must experience the death of everything they thought they knew about themselves. Most people encounter this threshold and retreat. They decide the prison wasn't so bad after all. They rebuild the persona. They lock the shadow away again. They return to unconsciousness because consciousness is too painful. But some people keep walking into the darkness, through the death, towards something they can't yet see but somehow know is waiting. And those people emerge transformed, not perfect, not enlightened in some mystical sense, but whole, integrated, free. Because on the other side of ego death is not nothing. It's everything. It's the self you were always meant to be, buried under layers of conditioning, fear, and false identity. And once you touch that self, even once, you can never fully return to the prison. Here's what changes everything. Freedom isn't about destroying the shadow. It's about embracing it. Most people misunderstand Jung's entire message. They think the goal is to get rid of the darkness, to eliminate the parts of themselves they don't like, to become some purified version of themselves where only the good remains. But that's not individuation. That's just another prison, a spiritual prison, where you're still at war with yourself, just with different weapons. Jung's radical insight was this: you don't become free by rejecting the shadow. You become free by integrating it, by bringing it into consciousness, by acknowledging, accepting, and incorporating every part of yourself you've been running from. The key isn't elimination, it's integration. And that changes the entire game. When you stop fighting your shadow and start dialoguing with it, something miraculous happens. The parts of you that felt dangerous become sources of power. The impulses you suppressed become creative energy. The truths you denied become the foundation of your authenticity. This is what Jung meant by the union of opposites. You don't choose between your light and your dark. You marry them. You bring them together. You allow them to inform each other, balance each other, complete each other. The angry part of you isn't just destructive rage, it's also your capacity for healthy boundaries, your ability to say no, your refusal to be violated. When integrated, it becomes your spine. The selfish part of you isn't just narcissism, it's also your capacity for self-care, your ability to prioritize, your refusal to be consumed by others. When integrated, it becomes your center. The fearful part of you isn't just cowardice. It's also your intuition, your warning system, your capacity for discernment. When integrated, it becomes your wisdom. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this deeply. He wrote about becoming who you are, not who you should be, not who others expect, but who you actually are, including the parts that terrify you. He said that you must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos isn't the enemy, it's the material. The key Jung found opens all doors because it's not a key to escape. It's a key to wholeness. You don't leave the prison by denying parts of yourself. You transcend the prison by embracing all of yourself. This is why suppression never works. This is why positive thinking alone is a trap. This is why trying to be perfect keeps you paralyzed. Because any approach that requires you to exile parts of yourself is just another form of imprisonment. Just another cage with prettier bars. Integration means sitting with your shadow, listening to it, asking what it needs, understanding why it exists, and then consciously choosing how to express it. Not unconsciously, not destructively, but deliberately, with awareness. Your shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be acknowledged. It wants to be seen. It wants to be integrated into your conscious life, so it stops controlling you from the unconscious. Abraham Maslow wrote about self-actualization, the process of becoming everything you're capable of being. But he noted that self-actualized people aren't perfect. They're whole. They've integrated their contradictions. They've accepted their humanity. They've stopped pretending to be anything other than what they are. When you integrate your shadow, you stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be acceptable. Because now, you're authentic. And authenticity doesn't seek approval. It radiates truth. The prison dissolves not because you escaped, but because you realized you were the jailer all along. You were the one keeping yourself small. You were the one enforcing the rules. You were the one punishing your truth. And when you stop, when you integrate instead of suppress, the walls simply cease to exist. This is Jung's key to freedom. Not rejection, integration. Not war with yourself. Peace with yourself. Not half of you against the other half. All of you finally allowed to exist. And when you hold that key, when you truly understand what it opens, you realize something profound. You were never meant to be only light. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness includes everything. You'll know freedom not by how it sounds, but by how it feels. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just settles into your body like breath you didn't know you were holding, like weight you didn't know you were carrying, like a voice you forgot was yours. When you finally integrate your shadow, when you finally accept all of yourself, when you finally stop performing and start existing, everything shifts. Not externally, necessarily. The world doesn't change. You do. You stop explaining yourself to people who weren't listening. You stop defending your choices to people whose approval you never needed. You stop contorting yourself into shapes that fit someone else's expectations, because now you're anchored in yourself, in your truth, in your wholeness. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you pretend to be, not who you wish you were, but who you actually are in all your complexity, contradiction, and completeness. This is the unlocked life, where you're no longer performing for an invisible audience, where you're no longer governed by unconscious patterns, where you're no longer split between who you are and who you show. You're just you, undivided, unashamed, unafraid. The people who can't handle your wholeness will leave, and you'll let them. Because you're no longer collecting approval. You're cultivating authenticity. And authenticity isn't for everyone. It's only for those brave enough to face their own. You'll make different choices, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you're aligned with something. Your values, your truth, your integrated self, the shadow and the light working together instead of at war. Some days will still be hard. Integration doesn't mean perfection. It means acceptance. It means you're no longer running from parts of yourself. You're working with them, listening to them, honoring them. And that creates a different kind of life. A life where you're not constantly exhausting yourself pretending, where you're not draining your energy, maintaining a false image, where you're not imprisoned by your own denial. You're free, not because you escaped, but because you stopped building the cage. This is what Jung meant when he said that your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. The prison was always internal, and so is the key. You don't need anyone's permission to be free. You don't need anyone's validation to be whole. You just need the courage to look at what you've been avoiding, to integrate what you've been suppressing, to become what you've always been beneath the mask. The unlocked life isn't easier. It's truer. It's not safer. It's freer. And once you taste that freedom, once you know what it feels like to exist as your whole self, you can never fully return to the prison because you finally understand. The bars were never real. They were just thoughts, beliefs, fears, stories you told yourself about what was possible and what wasn't. And now that you've stopped telling those stories, the prison has nowhere to exist except in memory. If you've made it this far, you're not here by accident. You're here because something in you is ready to break free. Subscribe, not for more content, but for more keys. Because freedom isn't one conversation. It's 1,000 conversations with yourself. And we're just getting started. The next video unlocks another door. Will you walk through it? You were never meant to live in a cage, not one built by others, and certainly not one built by yourself. You were meant to be whole, complete, free, and now you know how. Jung gave you the key. The rest is up to you. Stop convincing. Stop performing. Stop imprisoning yourself. Start integrating. Start becoming. Start living as the whole, undivided, unashamed person you were always meant to be. That's not just freedom. That's life. The prison is open. The door is unlocked. And you're finally ready to walk out. Not into a new cage, but into yourself. Fully, finally, free.